On June 15th, Reuters reported that, according to two sources familiar with the outcomes of the China-US talks in London, Chinese rare earth manufacturers have indeed obtained export licenses to the United States. However, these licenses are strictly limited to civilian products such as magnets, motor rotors, and components, once again proving that China will not allow any form of civil-to-military transactions. This move directly halted the triumphant celebrations within the Trump camp. Against the backdrop of Trump's announcement to increase the defense budget to $1 trillion, plans for designing high-techno weapons almost all rely on rare earths. If the US cannot quickly resolve this issue, the technological warfare front centered on rare earths faces the danger of defeat. Companies this time, it has imposed restrictions on their duration. The validity period is limited to 6 months. This means that US companies can import rare earths from China for a cycle of half a year, with China approving each procurement every 6 months in a continuous cycle. This approach prevents a problem: the US procuring sufficient rare earth resources and then resuming suppressive measures against China. This firm control over time, whether the US likes it or not, can ensure that China and the US maintain superficial harmony, preventing the US from continuously suppressing China. It can be said that this restriction was completely unexpected by the US, leaving no room for its delaying tactics. Secondly, China has put forward two major requirements for the import of rare earths by the US. The first requirement is that the importing companies must be in the civilian sector. This way, China has blocked the possibility of the US importing rare earths to maintain its military-industrial production capacity. The second requirement is that the demand must be reasonable. The criterion for determining reasonable demand is controlled by China. To give a simple example, if a private enterprise suddenly increases its procurement volume significantly compared to its usual purchases, it will arouse suspicion from China and consequently fail to pass the approval process. It must be said that from the duration to the sector and to the reasonable demand, China can complete its normal rare earth export work. Now, external attention has shifted from China resuming rare earth exports to when China will resume exporting rare earths for military use. In fact, this is like a TV series we watch, where each episode ends with a cliffhanger. China-US negotiations are also like this. From the first round of China-US agreement on intent to the second round where China resumed rare earth exports, it is highly likely that in the third round of China-US negotiations, China's focus will be on the issue of military rare earth exports. According to some rumors, China has already put forward corresponding conditions for the export of military rare earths to the US, which is that the US must resume high-end chip exports to China. This was also an issue where neither side conceded during the London talks. Western media have different interpretations of China's rare earth policy. Some analyzers suggest that China is not deliberately targeting the US, but rather fulfilling its international obligations by clearly restricting rare earth products that could be used for military purposes, demonstrating China's firm stance on fulfilling non-proliferation responsibilities on the international stage. However, this is like burying a soft nail, leaving the US with a thorn in its side. China is using rare earths as a sword, piercing Western hegemony with Western rules. A 180-day temporary permit, full commercial secret declarations. These seemingly dry compliance terms are making European and American military giants and car companies tremble between filling out forms and halting production. Recall the 1990s, when Chinese rare earths were sold cheaply like dirt. Western countries happily accepted these resources and secretly hoarded stockpiles. Today, China controls 90% of the global rare earth permanent magnet market. With a single command, European and American supply chains instantly run dry. This is not a conspiracy, but an overt strategy. China is using the game rules set by the West to force the West to swallow the bitter fruit of compliance control. From selling raw resources cheaply to monopolizing technology, this counterattack is by no means accidental, but the inevitable victory of China's perseverance. Do not think that China's current glory is a windfall from heaven. 40 years ago, the West single-handedly orchestrated a drama of resource plunder, forcing China to become a cheap labor provider for rare earths. Evidence shows that in the 1980s, the United States was the world's largest producer of rare earths, and Western companies like France's rhodium monopolized refining technology, strictly prohibiting the export of core processes to China. This led to China only being able to export raw ore and then repurchasing refined products at hundreds of times the price, losing hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth. The West also played the trick of fattening the fish for later harvest, encouraging China to export openly while secretly hoarding resources. For example, after Japan imported rare earths from China, it buried them for storage, enough to last for decades. The US closed its domestic mines in the 1990s, relying entirely on China for supply. This both depleted China's reserves and transferred pollution. This overt strategy was stark. The West used WTO rules as a shield to cheaply devour resources and then turn around and accuse China of disrupting the market. In 2010, when China tried to restrict exports, the West immediately initiated WTO lawsuits, forcing China to cancel quotas and tariffs in 2015, returning to being at the mercy of others. But the West miscalculated. China endured humiliation, but instead of collapsing, it ignited sparks in the dark night of technology. In the 1980s, Chinese scientists broke through the refining bottleneck, increasing the added value of rare earths by 20 times. They acquired Western giants like Rhodia, achieving a reversal from selling dirt to selling technology. These 20 years of perseverance laid the groundwork for today's counterattack. The West thought rules were shackles, but China saw them as weapons. The essence of China's counterattack lies in using their own methods against them. In 2024, the Rare Earth Management Regulations were introduced, not only plugging smuggling loopholes, but also using a combination of 180-day temporary permits and full commercial secret declarations to directly target the West's vital interests. The regulations require enterprises to log production and sales data in real time and implement a one-item, one-code traceability system. If the West wants to import rare earths, it must first submit a 180-day application, detailing the purpose, technical details, and even opening its factories for inspection. This set of compliance controls was originally a tool used by Europe and the US to sanction other countries. Now, China is returning the favor. Evidence reveals that European and American military industries rely on rare earths to manufacture missile guidance systems and aircraft engines, while car companies rely on rare earth permanent magnets to drive electric vehicles. A disruption in motor supply leads to production halts. However, under China's new regulations, Western companies find filling out forms like navigating a minefield. Declaring commercial secrets risks leaking core technologies. Not declaring leads to permit rejection and production line shutdowns. For example, US companies like MP Materials can only separate light rare earths and are helpless with medium and heavy rare earths. When filling out forms, even their purification processes must be exposed. Otherwise, after 180 days, the permit will not take effect. Western media lamented economic coercion, but China is merely learning from the West's old trick of patent manipulation. In 2010, the West accused China of resource hegemony. 10 years later, China's rare earth processing technology leads the world, with each ton's added value increasing by 20 times. China uses the rules more skillfully than the West. This is not domineering, but fair. The West first imposed chip blockades, and China reciprocated with rare earths, forcing them to suffer the consequences of their own rules. Strength. Solid evidence shows that China accounts for over 60% of global rare earth mining output, monopolizes 92% of refining operations, and controls 90% of the rare earth permanent magnet materials market. The lifeblood of Western military industries and car companies is entirely tied to this. Since 2022, China has precisely managed price wars. With the slowdown in new energy vehicle production capacity, rare earth supply has remained rigid, leading to a 50% price drop. Western giants have seen their profits halved, leading to layoffs and factory closures. EU President Ursula von der Leyen once boasted that the West must control China's rare earths, which now seems laughable. Europe and the US have abundant domestic mineral deposits, but they lack refining technology. Even if a California mine reopens, its ore still needs to be shipped to China for processing. The so-called desinicization strategy has completely failed. This is not a coincidence, but an overt strategy. China uses price leverage to support its no-energy industry. Low-cost rare earths help Chinese electric vehicles dominate the global market, while Western car companies struggle between filling out forms and halting production due to soaring costs. Evidence shows that BMW, General Motors, and others have been forced to accept Chinese inspectors in their factories to secure rare earth supplies, exposing their commercial secrets. The military sector is even more dire. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and others have seen missile production lines halt due to rare earth supply disruptions. The US Department of Defense urgently seeks to stockpile, but is blocked by China's traceability system, making smuggling impossible. Western public opinion clamors for sanctions, but China holds the initiative in industry, strictly controlling total volume and encouraging R&D, forcing the West to either cooperate or exit the stage of history. This rare earth war has finally made the West recognize reality. China is no longer a silent lamb, but a rule maker. Evidence indicates that China's continuous rare earth moves have consistently hit the West's pain points. This is not coercion, but legitimate self-defense. Under the 2025 new regulations, Western companies humbly apply for 180-day permits. This is essentially the beginning of their habituation to China's discourse power. In the past, they were imperious. Today, they fill out forms and seek approval. But China understands the art of not revealing all its cards. It is releasing signals of relaxation before a complete embargo, which both stabilizes the capital market and incites infighting within the West. In the long run, the rare earth war will reshape global supply chains. China is using policy leverage to force industrial upgrading, shifting from selling raw materials to R&D. New demands are exploding in emerging fields, such as new permanent magnet materials and humanoid robots. If the West refuses to comply, it risks permanently losing technological hegemony. Evidence warns that if the West insists on a small yard, high-fence approach to block technology, it will only accelerate China's independent innovation and repeat the chip defeat. Whatever is blocked, China will retaliate against. The author asserts that after this battle, China's rare earth discourse power will be as firm as a rock, and the spectacle of Western military industries and car companies kneeling for compliance will become the new normal. That's all for today's program. If you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your clicks mean a lot to me. See you next time.